This is Eddy Franklin on KBPN 104.7 FM. It's Sunday night, November 11th, 2007, and the clock just struck 10. Welcome to Blackpine After Dark. November is really settling in now. We're at 36 degrees tonight, and I can feel winter getting closer with every passing week. The trees are completely bare now, no leaves left, just dark branches against the sky. There's something stark about November, something stripped down. The colors are gone, the warmth is gone, and we're left with the bones of things. I don't mind it, though. There's an honesty to it. My wife and I took a walk this afternoon before the sun went down to the river trail. It was cold but clear, and the light was that particular golden color you only get in late autumn. Everything looked sharp and clean. We didn't see anyone else out there. I think most people are staying inside these days, and I don't blame them. But it was nice to get out, breathe some cold air, remember that the world exists beyond our warm house. Tonight I've got your letters, some news from the week, and I'm going to tell you a story about a con man who came through Blackpine back in 1916 and convinced half the town to buy worthless medicine. It's a good story, and it taught my grandfather a lesson he never forgot. Let's start with the news. The structural engineer finally assessed the old water mill this past week. He spent most of Tuesday out there looking at the building, taking measurements, checking the foundation, all of it. His report came back Thursday, and the news is mixed. The good news is that the foundation is solid. The stonework that supports the building is still intact and structurally sound. The bad news is that pretty much everything else needs major work. The roof is failing, several walls are compromised, the interior floor joists are rotted through in places. It's salvageable, but it's going to take significant time and money to restore it properly. Mayor Hutchins is meeting with the town council this Tuesday to discuss next steps. They'll look at the engineer's report, talk about costs, figure out if restoration is feasible, or if they need to consider other options. No decisions yet, but at least now they know what they're dealing with. Blackpine High played Ridgemont Friday night, away game, and it was close. Final score was 24-21. Pioneers won. Michael Dawes scored in the fourth quarter, and then Jake Thompson sealed it with an interception in the final 2 minutes. Coach Martinez said, after the game, he's never been more proud of this team. That means the Pioneers are going to the regional playoffs for the first time in 6 years. The whole town's excited about it. First playoff game is this coming Friday, November 16th, home game against Silverton. Should be a packed stadium. The library's fall reading program drawing happened Tuesday. Dorothy pulled the winning name at noon like she said she would. Winner was Maggie Harper. She read 7 books. More than the required 5. Maggie picked up her prize basket Wednesday, and apparently she's very happy with it. If you participated but didn't win, don't worry. Dorothy says she's planning another reading program for winter. The old cinema had a good turnout for The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly this past weekend. Anthony says it's one of his favorite westerns to show because it still holds up so well. This coming weekend they're showing High Noon, Friday and Saturday at 7, Sunday, matinee at 3. Classic Gary Cooper film, if you're into westerns. That's the main news. Let me get to some announcements. The Community Center is starting winter knitting classes this Thursday, November 15th at 6 p.m. Beginners are welcome. They'll teach you basic stitches, how to read patterns. All the fundamentals classes run for 6 weeks, and by the end you should be able to knit yourself a scarf or a hat. Just in time for the coldest part of winter, materials list is posted at the community center, or you can call and they'll tell you what you need to bring. My wife's been knitting for years and swears by it. Says it's relaxing, meditative almost. If you've ever wanted to learn, now's your chance. Miller's Market reminder. If you want to reserve a fresh turkey for Thanksgiving, you need to fill out the order form by November 15th. That's this Thursday. They're also running a sale on cranberry sauce and stuffing mix through the weekend. The church canned food drive is still ongoing through November 18th. They're collecting non-perishable items for families in need for Thanksgiving. Drop-off is at the church during office hours, or you can leave donations in the box by the main entrance. And Dorothy wants everyone to know the library will be closed Thursday, November the 22nd for Thanksgiving. Regular hours resume Friday the 23rd. That covers announcements. Let me take a quick break, and when I come back, I'll tell you about Professor Edmund Thornwell and his miraculous medicinal tonic. Back in a moment. It's quiet up here tonight. I can hear the wind outside, not strong, just a steady presence. The house is warm, the coffee's hot, and I'm comfortable. These are the nights I appreciate most, when there's nothing urgent happening, nothing demanding attention, just the simple fact of being warm and safe while it's cold outside. All right, before I get to your letters tonight, I want to tell you a story. I was getting ready earlier, looked in the bathroom mirror, and caught sight of my head under the light. I'm 57 years old, and my hair's getting thin, not gone yet, but definitely thinning on top. You can see scalp through it now when the light hits right. It happens to most men eventually, nothing unusual about it, but it still catches me off guard sometimes when I see myself. I remember having a full head of hair when I was younger, thick, dark brown. Took it completely for granted. It's been slowly disappearing for years, and I know where this is heading. I can't complain, though. It lasted for way longer than I expected it to. What I am going to tell you now is a true story, by the way. It's documented in the town records, and some of the older families in town still have the bottles their grandparents bought. My mother heard it directly from her father, who was one of the people who got taken in by this man. So let me tell you about Professor Edmund Thornwell and his miraculous medicinal tonic. It was the summer of 1916. Blackpine was still adjusting to life after the logging industry had started its decline. The orchards were doing well, but the town was smaller than it had been, more isolated. We didn't get newspapers from Portland or Seattle regularly, maybe once a week if we were lucky, and even then they were days old by the time they arrived. There was no radio yet, no telephone lines connecting us to the outside world. If something happened in the city, it took time for word to reach us, sometimes weeks. That isolation is important to this story because it meant we had no way to verify anything strangers told us. We just had to take people at their word. Professor Edmund Thornwell, and he insisted on being called Professor, though nobody knew where he'd gotten that title, came through Blackpine one time in the summer of 1916. He arrived in a fancy wagon pulled by 2 horses. The wagon painted bright red with gold lettering that said, "Thornwell's Miraculous Medicinal Tonic, Nature's Answer to All Ailments." He set up on Main Street, right in front of where Miller's Market is now, and he started his pitch. And what a pitch it was! My mother said her father described Thornwell as the most charismatic man he'd ever met. Tall, well-dressed in a 3-piece suit, perfectly groomed mustache, voice like honey. He spoke like an educated man, used big words, quoted Shakespeare and the Bible. He looked and sounded like someone you could trust. He gathered a crowd, which wasn't hard in a small town where entertainment was scarce, and he pulled out a bottle of his tonic, dark glass bottle, hand-written label, filled with a brownish liquid, and then he started listing everything it could cure. Rheumatism, 1 spoonful twice a day. Headaches, a capful before bed. Stomach troubles, take it with meals. Fatigue, it'll give you energy. Insomnia, it'll help you sleep. Toothaches, rub it on your gums. Women's complaints, he had recommendations for that. Consumption, paralysis, dropsy, neuralgia, baldness. He had a cure for everything. 1 bottle, dozens of ailments. But here's what made Thornwell's pitch really convincing. He had a plant in the crowd, an accomplice, a man who'd show up pretending to be a local or a traveler passing through, and when Thornwell asked if anyone had tried the tonic before, this man would step forward, with a testimonial. "I had terrible rheumatism," the man would say. "Could barely walk. Tried everything. Nothing worked. Then I tried Professor Thornwell's tonic, and within 2 weeks I was walking without pain." It's a miracle. Or he'd claim it cured his wife's headaches, or his father's paralysis, or his own stomach troubles, whatever Thornwell needed him to say, and because the man looked and sounded sincere, people believed him. Why wouldn't they? He was just a regular person sharing his experience. My grandfather, Thomas Gray, was 25 years old in 1916 and already losing his hair. He was married to my grandmother, was working at one of the orchards, and was deeply self-conscious about going bald so young. When Thornwell mentioned that the tonic could restore hair growth, my grandfather paid attention. When the plant in the crowd claimed it had worked for his brother's baldness, my grandfather was sold. He bought 6 bottles that day, $2 each, $12 total. That was several days' wages. He wasn't alone. Half the town bought the tonic, some for baldness, some for joint pain, some for fatigue, some for other ailments. Thornwell sold out his entire stock. He packed up his wagon and left town, moving on to the next place, the next group of people to con. My grandfather used the tonic faithfully, twice a day, every day, exactly as Thornwell had instructed. He was to take 1 spoonful twice a day, and he did this for 6 months. As you might have guessed, nothing happened. His hair didn't grow back. It kept thinning, kept disappearing, just like it had been doing before. After about 6 months, my grandfather started talking to other people in town who'd bought the tonic. Nobody's ailments had improved. The man with rheumatism still had rheumatism. The woman with headaches still had headaches. The people who'd bought it for fatigue were still tired. Not a single person had experienced any improvement at all. Slowly, people started to realize they'd been conned. But what could they do? Thornwell was long gone. They had no way to find him, no way to get their money back. They'd been taken. And that was that. My grandfather had only 1 of the bottles by then, and put it on a shelf in his workshop. My mother said he kept it as a reminder of his own gullibility. Then, in early 1917, something happened that explained everything. The U.S. government decided to crack down on snake oil salesmen, these frauds who'd been operating for decades, selling worthless medicines to desperate people. The government tested one of the most famous products on the market, Clark Stanley's snake oil liniment. Stanley had been selling this stuff since the 1880s, claiming it could cure everything from rheumatism to paralysis. He'd made a fortune off it. The government analyzed it. And you know what they found? Mineral oil, beef fat, red pepper, and turpentine. No snake oil at all. Not a drop. It was completely worthless as medicine. Just a mixture of cheap ingredients designed to look and smell medicinal. The news spread fast in the cities. Newspapers ran articles about the bust. Clark Stanley was exposed as a fraud, and suddenly people started questioning all the other snake oil salesmen out there. If Stanley's product was fake, what about all the others? Other snake oil salesmen started getting exposed, getting run out of towns, fleeing before authorities could catch up with them. It became national news. The con was over. A man from Blackpine traveled to Portland for business that spring and saw the newspapers. Headlines about Clark Stanley, about the government testing snake oil products and finding them worthless articles explaining how these salesmen operated, how they used plants in the crowd, how they preyed on desperate people. The man returned to Blackpine with newspapers and stories. Word spread quickly through town. My grandfather and everyone else who'd bought Thornwell's tonic realized they'd been part of a nationwide con. They were furious, but Thornwell was long gone. There was nothing to be done about it. Except Thornwell wasn't as gone as they thought. Late in 1917, fall, maybe early winter, Thornwell showed up in Blackpine again. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. He'd been caught and exposed up north somewhere. I don't know the details, but my mother said he'd barely escaped an angry mob in another town. He was fleeing south, disheveled and desperate, and he stumbled into Blackpine, not remembering that he'd conned them a year earlier, or maybe hoping they wouldn't remember him. He came into town on foot, no wagon, no fancy suit, looking rough. Someone asked him what happened, and he claimed he'd been attacked by bandits on the road, that they'd taken everything he had. But someone recognized him. "That's Professor Thornwell," they said. "The man who sold us that worthless tonic." Word spread fast. Within minutes, a crowd had gathered. My grandfather was there. Other people who'd bought the tonic were there. "We know who you are," someone said. "You were here last year." Thornwell realized his mistake. He tried to explain, tried to talk his way out of it, but the crowd wasn't having it. My grandfather stepped forward. "I used your tonic for 6 months," he said. "Nothing. My hair didn't grow back. Nothing changed at all. I paid you $12 for it." Others chimed in. "Me too. Didn't help my rheumatism at all. My headaches got worse." "You're a fraud, and we all know it now." Thornwell had nothing to say to that. The evidence was right there in front of him. All these people he'd conned, standing there angry and tired of being lied to. Then my grandfather did something I think is brilliant. He'd kept that bottle on his workshop shelf for over a year, and he quickly slid inside his house to fetch it. Then he went beside our professor and held it up. "You look terrible, friend. Here, why don't you try some of this miracle tonic? It cures everything. Remember?" He held the bottle out mockingly. The crowd laughed. Someone else said, "Go ahead, drink it. You said it works." The crowd pressed in, and before Thornwell could stop them, someone grabbed the bottle and forced him to drink his own medicine, made him swallow his own con. The crowd laughed and jeered as Thornwell choked it down. He looked humiliated, defeated, caught in the perfect trap of his own making. The sheriff arrived, probably someone had run to get him, and took Thornwell away. I don't know if he was arrested or just escorted out of town, with a warning never to return, but either way, that was the last anyone in Blackpine saw of Professor Edmund Thornwell. Later that year, 1917, the federal government passed laws making it illegal to sell products with false medical claims. The era of snake oil salesmen was officially over. My grandfather kept that bottle on his shelf for the rest of his life. My mother said he'd point to it sometimes and say, "That's what happens when you trust someone just because they sound convincing." My grandfather went completely bald by his 30s and stayed that way for the rest of his life. He died when I was 5, so I barely remember him. But the photos show a man with no hair at all on top. My mother said he eventually made peace with it, but it took time. She also said my grandmother never cared about it one bit, told him more than once that a good man has plenty of other qualities worth caring about, and hair isn't one of them. My grandmother loved him for who he was, not for what was on top of his head. I think that helped him accept it more than anything else. I think about that story sometimes when I see ads for miracle products, weight loss pills, anti-aging creams, supplements that promise to cure everything. The methods have changed, the products have changed, but the con is exactly the same. Someone charismatic telling you they have the answer to your problems. All you have to do is buy their product, plant fake reviews online, instead of using an accomplice in a crowd. Use science-y sounding language that doesn't actually mean anything. Prey on people who are desperate for solutions. Snake oil salesmen never went away. They just got better marketing. So that's the story of Professor Edmund Thornwell and how he conned Blackpine in 1916, and how the town got their revenge when he stumbled back through a year later. It's a good reminder. If something sounds too good to be true, it is. And sometimes justice does catch up with people. And as for my own thinning hair, I'm 57. It's going and it's not coming back. And unlike my grandfather, I'm not going to waste money trying to fix it. I'll just wear a hat when it's cold and accept that this is what getting older looks like. All right, that's the snake oil story. Let me take another break, and when I come back, I'll get to your letters. Back in a moment. Thanksgiving's in less than 2 weeks now. Thursday, November 22nd. My wife's already planning the menu, already making lists of what needs to be bought. And when we're hosting this year, her sister and brother-in-law are coming up from Eugene, staying through the weekend. It'll be nice to have family around, nice to have a full house for a few days. I don't mind the preparation and the cooking. Actually, I enjoy it. There's something satisfying about planning a big meal, making sure everything comes together at the right time, and the leftovers are the best part. Turkey sandwiches for days. All right, let's get to your letters. P.O. Box 147, Blackpine. First one here. Eddie, I wanted to give a shout-out to my twin sister. Her name is Tess. We both love listening to your show every Sunday night. She lives on the left side of town, and I live on the right side, but we're always listening at the same time, and we love your show. So shout-out to Tess Tickle. If you're listening right now, this is your twin. Love you, sis. Well, that's sweet. Twin sisters living on opposite sides of town, but still connected through the radio every Sunday night. Tess Tickle, your sister's thinking of you tonight, and I think that's wonderful. That's what this show is for, bringing people together even when they're apart. I've got a younger sister myself. She lives in Arizona now, moved out there about 15 years ago. We talk on the phone every few weeks, but it's not the same as living close by. I miss her, honestly. We grew up together in this town, spent our whole childhood here, and now we're thousands of miles apart. That's life. I suppose people move, build their own lives elsewhere. But twins, that's a different kind of bond entirely. I've heard people say that twins have a connection that's hard to explain, that they can sense what the other is feeling, even when they're apart. I don't know if that's true or just something people say, but I do know that growing up with someone from the very beginning, sharing everything from day one, that creates something special. So even though you and Tess live on opposite sides of town, you've still got that connection. And the fact that you're both listening to this show at the same time every Sunday, that's your way of staying close. I think that's really nice. Thanks for writing in, and Tess Tickle. I hope you're listening. Next letter, this one's from James. Eddie, my son is 17, and he's talking about joining the military after high school. He wants to serve, says it's something he feels called to do. I respect that, but I'm terrified. I don't want to lose him. I don't want him in danger, but I also don't want to hold him back from something he believes in. How do you support your kid when they want to do something that scares you? James, this is hard, really hard. Your son wants to serve his country, which is honorable and worth respecting, but you're his father and you're scared for him. Both of those things can be true at the same time. Here's what I'd say. You support him by being honest. Tell him you're proud of him for wanting to serve. Tell him you respect his decision, and also tell him you're scared. Don't hide that. He needs to know that wanting to protect him doesn't mean you don't believe in him. Ask him questions. Make sure he's thought this through. Make sure he understands what he's signing up for. Military service is serious. It changes people. It demands a lot. And yes, it can be dangerous. He should go into it with his eyes open. But if he's thought about it and he still wants to go, then you let him go. You support him. You write to him. You send him care packages. You stay connected however you can. And you trust that you raised him well enough to handle whatever comes. My father served in World War II. My grandfather, different grandfather than the one from the snake oil story, was in Korea. Both of them came back different than they left, but both of them were glad they served. It meant something to them. If your son feels that same pull, that same sense of duty, then that's worth honoring. It's okay to be scared, James, but don't let your fear stop him from becoming who he needs to be. On to the next letter. Eddie, I've been listening to your stories about Blackpine's history, and I love them. Do you know anything about the orchards, like how they got started, who planted the first trees, that sort of thing? I've lived here my whole life, and I realized I don't actually know that story. Thanks for doing this show. Rebecca. Rebecca, that's a great question, and I don't know the full answer off the top of my head. I know the orchards started in the late 1800s, after the logging industry was already established, and I know they became more important after logging declined, but as for who planted the first trees, which varieties were first, how it all got organized. I'd have to do some research. Tell you what, let me look into that. I'll talk to the Historical Society, see what records they have, and I'll do a proper story about the orchards in a future show. You're right that it's an important story. The orchards saved this town. We should know how they came to be. Thanks for the question, Rebecca. Give me a few weeks to research it properly, and I'll get you an answer. A light. We got one last letter. Found a set of house keys on Main Street near the post office. Blue keychain. Claim at the post office front desk. Dorothy. There you go. If those are your keys, Dorothy's got them. That's the letters for tonight. Let me tell you one quick thing about apples, and then we'll wrap up. Today we have an interesting one. This one is something that surprised me when I first learned it, so I figure it is worth sharing with all of you out there listening. Did you know that if you plant seeds from your favorite apple, let's say a Honeycrisp or a Granny Smith, the tree that grows from that seed will not produce the same apple? That is right. Apple trees do not grow true from seed. You could take a seed from the most perfect Fuji apple you have ever tasted, plant it in good soil, water it, care for it, and wait years for it to bear fruit. And when it finally does, you will get something completely different. Maybe something delicious, maybe something wonderful, or maybe something bitter and hard that nobody would want to eat. That is why orchardists use a technique called grafting. They take a cutting from the tree they want, the one that produces the exact apple they are looking for, and they attach it to rootstock. It is the only way to guarantee you get the same apple generation after generation. Every Honeycrisp apple you have ever eaten came from trees that are all genetically identical, all grafted from the same original tree. It makes you think, doesn't it? Even something as simple and honest as an apple has mysteries built into it. Even apples keep their secrets. Even apples like to surprise you. And that is your apple fact for tonight. We're halfway through November now. Thanksgiving's coming, then December and Christmas, and the end of the year. Time moves fast once we're past Halloween. I'll be back next Sunday, November 18th, with more news, more letters, more stories. Until then, stay warm. Be kind to each other. If you've got family far away like I do, maybe give them a call this week. It means more than you might think. Thank you for listening tonight. Thank you for writing in. Thank you for being part of this. This is Eddy Franklin, and you've been listening to Blackpine After Dark on KBPN 104.7 FM. Good night, Blackpine.